Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shields, destabilizers, peasants, vassals, Druze, Christians, Sunnis, Shiites, Lebanese, geopolitical fans. I'm a useful idiot. Today I want to talk about Lebanon. And Lebanon is another country, as I like to say, that isn't on everyone's radar, but it will be soon. And there's been some interesting events going on there. Most people are aware of the fact that the Syrian civil war is going on right now, and weapons and fighters are slipping in and out of the border with Lebanon and Syria. And we've also had border strikes all along that area between Syria and Lebanon and Israel and Lebanon and Syria. And but there's also been a couple other interesting things going on, and two of them are the fact that just several days ago the Prime Minister Mikati stepped down, and that's a big deal. He was the Hezbollah representative in this coalition government, and back in October of 2012, the country's top intelligence officer was assassinated. And of course, fingers are pointing in all directions: Israel, Syria, Iran, who's involved in all these activities. And I think it's part of the regime change. And I take a little satisfaction here for a moment, because I did a video on Lebanon earlier when I suggested some things were going to be happening there. And someone from Lebanon actually challenged my choice of the phrase regime change in Lebanon, because he felt like they have a democratically elected government there. But I assured him that I only meant regime change as a policy of our State Department, not necessarily referring to the nature of his government. And here we find essentially some regime change going on. Secretary of State John Kerry has already contacted President Suleiman in Lebanon and is approving of his handling of this neighboring war in Syria. So anyway, that's what's going on. And there's also U.S. calls for a new coalition government. These calls started back in October when that assassination occurred. And so the U.S. is actively calling for a new government there. So this is part of this whole pattern all across the Middle East, and Lebanon is part of that. And I want to remind everyone that Lebanon is one of the countries on the Wesley Clark list, the infamous Wesley Clark list of all the countries through the Middle East that we're going to have regime change. And they're all getting regime change. There will be only one left after Lebanon and Syria, and that will be Iran. So let's take a look at all the dynamics that are high points of what we need to be concerned about in Lebanon right now. The first thing is that the political parties are divided over support for or against the Assad regime. So the government is nearly split down the middle on whether to support the rebels or support Assad. And no surprise there, because of course Syria had occupied Lebanon since 1976 and only withdrew in 2004. So the fates and nature of Lebanon and Syria are seriously intertwined. The second thing is we have Hezbollah, the powerful Shia group that dominates the government, supports Assad, but also needs to avoid sectarian clashes in Lebanon. So very difficult. Hezbollah is a government within a government in Lebanon, and they are helpless to do too much to support their friend Assad right next door. The third thing is that some Sunni groups are directly aiding the Syrian rebels. So we have Syrian rebels coming in and out of Lebanon. We have rebels going in to Syria from Lebanon. We have arms going into Syria from Lebanon. So they're already part of that conflict, like all the other countries of that region. So four, we have the Syrian conflict could inflame the same Sunni-Shia tensions that we see in all the rest of this region, and these are used to help destabilize these countries. So we can see a great deal of destabilization with the same Shia-Sunni dynamic. And then you throw in the Christians as well. Things get very, very complicated indeed. And so number five, the Prime Minister wanted to stay out of Syria. And incidentally, that is the same Prime Minister that just resigned. But I think President Suleiman will still want to stay out of the Syrian conflict. Number 6, there's a huge imbalance in Lebanon now. Not only do they have 400,000 Palestinian refugees living within the country and have been there for decades, now we have 200,000 more refugees from the Syrian conflict. So this is really taxing the capabilities of such a small country like Lebanon, particularly their economy slowing down right now. Number 7, Hezbollah is dependent on Assad in Syria. And this is very crucial in the U.S., Saudi, Israeli plan to make changes in Lebanon, because Hezbollah has to be removed, at least the military arms. In fact, it's interesting. The UK only considers the military part of Hezbollah a terrorist group, whereas a lot of countries like the United States and Israel and Saudi Arabia consider the entire organization a terrorist group. But they actually have a lot of social programs and a much larger political wing that dominates the country. So anyway, if they get rid of Syria and Iran, then Hezbollah will be neutralized, and Lebanon can be brought into the new landscape that the United States and Saudi Arabia and Israel are creating in the Middle East. And then last but not least, like I say, Lebanon is a country on the Wesley Clark Military State Department hit list for regime change, and I assure you it will be coming if this is not it already. And of course the U.S. and the Saudis want a Sunni-dominated coalition, and this is what they're gearing for. And in fact, what makes me nervous now is Israeli newspapers reported that the U.S., France, and Saudi Arabia have held discussions just this month about possibly arming Lebanese groups to act against the Hezbollah-Iran axis in Lebanon. So could we see another Syria erupt in Lebanon? And is that the U.S.-Saudi game plan, once again, to arm their side and come out with a Sunni-dominated Lebanese and unleashing another civil war on this poor country that's gone through more than its fair share of civil wars? And in fact, as usual, I'm going to give a little history on Lebanon because it's been out of the radar for quite some time now. People of my generation are well aware of our involvements in Lebanon and its relation to that region. For nothing else, the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing, where 241 U.S. Marines were killed. But anyway, let's go back, because we have some commonality here once again because of the post-colonial world. One of the reasons why we have all the countries in this region, all players in each other's internal affairs, is because of those post-colonial borders. For example, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey all have to deal with issues with the Kurds internally and with each other because of all the common interests that just overlap all throughout that region. And no surprise, Lebanon was part of the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Ottoman Empire, for 400 years. And during World War I, actually 30% of the population of Lebanon died from famine. Then France took over in the post-World War I era, when the Ottoman Empire was dismantled by the Allies. The Lebanon territory had normally been Christian, but was expanded to include Muslim territories, and has given us the greater Lebanon we see today. And in fact, in 1920, part of Lebanon was claimed by Syria next door, and there was a Franco-Syrian war, which the French won, of course, and so that was settled in a greater Lebanon, was turned into the Lebanese Republic in 1926 under French rule. And ironically, it was Nazi Germany that gave Lebanon its independence, because occupied France was given independence to Lebanon in 1943 during the World War II, and then French troops withdrew in 1946. And interestingly, they had a coalition religious government. Even back then, they had the foresight to have it written in their constitution that they would have a Christian, a Shiite, a Muslim, and a Greek Orthodox as the leaders of their government. And so they've had a history of tourism, agriculture, and banking. And in fact, in the intervening years after the 50s and 60s and 70s, things got pretty good for Lebanon. It was a very lush spot in kind of the Switzerland of the Middle East, they used to call it. So anyway, and then in 1948, they supported the war against Israel. And that's when the first 100,000 Palestinians fled to Lebanon, and Israel didn't allow any of those 100,000 refugees to return to Israel. And there's 400,000 refugees now, as I mentioned before. Then in 1958, there was a Islamic coup in an attempt to have Lebanon join the United Arab Emirates. And in fact, in 1958, 5,000 U.S. Marines went into Lebanon to support the government there. And then the 1975 to 1990 was the civil war in Lebanon, 16 years, with 150,000 killed, 200,000 wounded. And it was at that time in 1976 that Syria invaded. And then 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon. And then in 2000, Israel invaded southern Lebanon. And then in 2006, Israel invaded southern Lebanon. So they've been tossed around and invaded quite a few times in the last 35 or so years. So I wish the best for Lebanon. They apparently have a lot to offer, and they've had a lot of impediments to their growth. While they've had some real high spots, they are the second largest per capita recipient of U.S. aid behind Israel, which is saying something, $400 million since 2005. And incidentally, $400 million a month is what Hezbollah gets from Iran. So Hezbollah is seriously financed by Iran, which gives them a considerable edge trying to manipulate Lebanese society, having all that extra money. And interestingly enough, too, the Lebanese army is 72,000, and then that's augmented by 65,000 Hezbollah fighters. And they reportedly have 50,000 missiles right now. So as far as a guerrilla force goes, they are the most formidable in the world. And the latest thing about Lebanon, and this is another reason why U.S. and Saudi interest and Israeli interest will focus on Lebanon, is because natural gas and oil have been discovered off the coast, and we will want to have access to exploiting that. So that's another reason why they factor into U.S. Future foreign policy. So the Syrian civil war has led to spillover, and there's a deterioration of security and stability, targeted assassinations, kidnappings, rising political tension, and economic slowing. And like I mentioned before, it gets scary when you have an Israeli report that U.S., France, and Saudi Arabia have held discussions this month about possibly arming Lebanese group to act against Hezbollah. Ill-advised, I would suggest, to unleash that sort of instability in Lebanon, but perhaps that is what they want. They certainly didn't mind unleashing that in Syria, and Lebanon could be ripe for that, and we could get a complete makeover of Lebanon and the complete ousting of Hezbollah from within, and that would fit in line with the way United States foreign policy certainly has worked so far. So there we have it, Lebanon. I think we need to keep our eye on Lebanon. I think things could deteriorate there fast, and we could see this entire region and this war spread out a little bit more, as it seems to do every single day. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.